Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Shirogorov NeOn Zero. First off, though, I want to thank very much my Patreon patrons who make it possible for me to look at a $715 knife and say, you know what, I should probably pick one of those guys up for review. And in fact, I bought this guy myself. The main reason for that, although I had very generous offers for a loaner, I wanted to spend the time. I wanted to have no time constraints. I wanted to be able to review this guy when I was ready, but not before I was ready. I didn't want to have to try and push, and I wanted to give myself, frankly, the opportunity to fall back in love. Because the Shirogorov NeOn Light was that was one of the very first shining gems of my channel. Because in 2016, it was truly an exceptional knife. There was a whole lot to love about that guy. And so I wanted to give myself the chance to fall back in love even at this price point. And so having the ability to do that is a wonderful thing. And my patrons make the channel possible, but they, make this review possible specifically. So thank you very much for that, patrons. Next thing, let's do a size comparison. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica and the Spyderco PM2. So what we can see here is that although the handle is actually very compact, I mean, the Delica is actually about the same size as the handle here, this guy is packing a little bit more than the PM2 in terms of sharpened blade length into this body here. It's sort of a big little knife. And this new configuration, the Zero configuration, definitely makes it feel a little bit more that way than the previous one, mainly because it's bigger. Sorry about that. Just had to rearrange my whole setup here. And then here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2. And so you can see here that, yeah, that's definitely that's a slightly bigger knife. Although, again, the comparison isn't all that crazy. And then actually I want to do one other comparison, well, two other comparisons here. These are not so much size comparisons in that most people know about them, but they're very good comparisons for this knife. These are, in my mind, some of this knife's stiffest competition. This is the Southern Knives Mini Tolt up here, and this is the Holt Knives Spectre down here. So those are some very interesting comparisons, and we'll talk about those a little bit later on. Nevertheless, that's the size. Actually, let me do a quick measurement on this guy because we're coming in here around 3.25, maybe 3.3 inches. They have increased the size of this guy, actually non-trivially. And that's one of the things I think that's changed my opinion about it fairly strongly. But anyways, this is the NeOn Zero. Like I said, Shirogorov, for whatever reason, decided, you know what, that looked too fancy. Let's go ahead and simplify this. They moved a lot of the milling into internal pocketing and milling like that. They changed the size of it. They changed the blade profile, and they raised the price. But anyways, so this is a brand new version of the Zero, and they said it was like they were starting over, and they kind of did. So let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, the ugly of this very interesting knife. So on the good side, to start with, I mentioned there's internal milling. There is massive internal milling in here. I'll try and get a flashlight so you guys can see exactly what's going on here. But what we can see is that, yeah, there's a bunch of pocketing up in here. In fact, previously on the NeOn, the internal milling was sort of more aesthetic than anything. That was kind of a cool touch, right? But at the same time, there really wasn't a lot of weight reduction pocketing going on here. Whereas on this guy, they have pocketed it out substantially, and that makes for the knife feeling a little bit lighter than you might think. Look at the size. We're coming in here at around 2.9 ounces for about 3.3 inches of blade. That's relatively lightweight. It is a lightweight knife, and that internal milling is exactly why. It is impressive internal milling work, that's for sure. Next thing, ergonomically speaking, it's pretty damn nice. The clip actually works very well, being relatively flat and well positioned. Your hand goes exactly where you want it to. It hits this jimping, which is just beautifully rounded. Well, not rounded necessarily, but it's squared off. It works well. It's not like digging into your hand here. You've got a nice little area here to catch your finger when you flip the knife. I mean, overall, ergonomically speaking, it's quite a good piece. And with this little bit of jimping in the back here again, it feels like it's pretty secure in the hand, even though you've lost some of that external texturing. Next thing, the size on this guy is still pretty nice. I certainly preferred it a little bit smaller, but that's my own personal bias. For many people, this sort of thing is almost a perfect size range. This is a very, very nice size for a pocket knife for a lot of folks. And I think it works out pretty well, and it carries very nicely. This is a small knife in the pocket. The way that the blade sits mostly flush here, this carries about the same size as a Spyderco Delica, although a little bit narrower. And so that's great. I think it works really well in that way. And carrying this guy, I felt like, yeah, that was well done. Next thing, it is a relatively thin knife, meaning that there's really not all that much to it on this dimension here vertically. It's relatively thin, and that again, it makes it carry very, very nicely. Next thing, the action on this guy is excellent. I mean, it's a Shirogorov. The action on it had better be excellent. That was sort of how they made their name initially, right? In the knife market, or at least the high-end market, was by having these awesome actions. And indeed, the action here is pretty damn good. It is a 100% reliable flipper. In fact, the detent is very, very strong. We'll talk about that later on. But it is a reliable flipper. If you get it to open at all, it will open reliably 100%. It drops shut very nicely. I'll show that off here in just a second. Get the blade onto the ramp. Yeah, that drops shut. It's a very, very nice action. It has a low-key flipper tab. Both when the knife is open, you can barely see it there, and when the knife is closed, this is just barely pocket pecking, and the way that this guy hangs in the pocket means it's just really not going to be an issue. And they've got nice little chamfers all around the outside of the flipper tab. I mean, again, the machining on this knife is spectacular, with really nice little jimping here that offers a very nice mix of traction and scratchitude. It's quite good in that way. And this whole thing is using the MRBS system, or multi-row bearing system. I thought they had an insignia someplace. Oh, here it is. It's right underneath there. It's the multi-row bearing system. Basically, what that means is that you have not just one row of bearings, of loose bearings, by the way. This is a take the knife apart and all the balls fall out sort of knife. But they're not loose bearing. I'm sorry, they're not just one row like in IKBS or in some of the other versions, but it is multiple rows. They're kind of offset from each other. And this, in theory, will provide a little bit of extra support, right? In that the blade is being, the weight of any side-to-side pressure here is actually being supported not just by one row, but by multiples. That can't hurt, right? But it works well. I mean, the action is absolutely great. And then the knife has just a bunch of nice details to it. And the details are very subtle, but things like the chamfer around the pivot screw here is nice. Even the screw heads. I hate these screw heads as a disassembly person, but the screw heads work really nicely. You've got the nice little bear logo going on there. You've got a very nice backspacer. Backspacers are completely underrated, but you can see here that the backspacer kind of sticks up, giving you a little bit of jimping here, but then flattens out and disappears in a very nice way down there, although this little gap there. Anyways, I digress. You have a beautiful lock bar relief cut out here, so you can see you've got a nice right here, you've got all this beautiful, beautiful little area. And they've gone a little bit above and beyond there. That's one of the few areas externally where they've really gone above and beyond by giving a little bit of extra pattern in there, a little bit of extra something. And that's kind of a cool thing. If they're going to have it external, which, you know, whatever, that's a nice way to go about doing it. You've got some nice scalloping here. Sorry, almost. I had my finger on the lock bar there. Got some nice scalloping here. You've got nice jimping everywhere. On this guy, it has sort of a two-tone look, with the handle being darker than the blade, but both of them being gray. It's a little gray overall, but, you know, hey, it is what it is. The clip screw is internal on this guy. The finish on the screws themselves is quite nice. Kind of a more reflective finish. Again, that adds, and it matches the blade, so it adds to that two-tonitude of the whole thing. The font on there is very, very nice. It's a relatively sterile-looking knife. I mean, details-wise, it's very clear that somebody spent a lot of time on this, and that's not even counting the internal machining. So the knife is absolutely 100% well-designed in that way, and, well, okay. It's very, very nicely designed in a lot of ways, and aesthetically is up there. And you get, like, over-travel stops. You get all kinds of things in here. And it's a well-designed knife in most regards, and the details are definitely there, and that is a very nice thing. And so to me, actually, all of that is the good, is that it's got nice details and excellent action. It's very thin, and a nice size, very nice ergonomics, and massive internal milling. On the great side, to me, you know, the action could very easily be that. For a lot of people, and especially if you're really good at keeping your finger off that lock bar, which, you know, allows the knife to open and whatnot, you are going to, you're going to love the action. But the blade, to me, is actually the winner. Because this thing is ridiculously thin behind the edge. I like very much knives that cut. The blade stock isn't all that thick, and the cutting edges are very, very thin. It comes to an absolutely delightful little point, although the V bevel's a little asymmetrical here. Anyways, I digress. It comes to an absolutely delightful point here. This knife cuts like freaking crazy. It is amazing in that way. It is M390 steel, which is one of the better steels out there. It is a very nice blade finish with sort of a reflective blast on it. It feels like it has been blasted of some variety. Maybe it's a very weird stonewash, but it's definitely there, and you can see that, and you can, frankly, enjoy it. And it also has a beautiful sharpening sharpening choy a lot here. So it is a very easy knife to sharpen as well. To me, 100%, my absolute favorite part of this knife is this blade. This blade is absolutely spectacular, and there really just isn't anything wrong with it at all, in my personal estimation. And then, by the way, the crowning on the spine, making a very subtle swedge here that disappears as you... There is so much to love about this knife. And the blade, though, for me, is chief among them. So, to me, at least, that's what's great, is this blade is just astounding. On the bad side, though, there is, unfortunately, a fair amount here. To start with, you know, I'm going to be honest with you. The reason I didn't have a Zero on my table a long time ago is because I kind of don't like some of the changes they've made here. I don't know that the Neon needed to be bigger. I know Shirogorov is just getting bigger, but still, guys, come on. The Neon was a nice, compact size. It dealt with some of the... Why did they go bigger on this guy? It looks more plain as well. The original Neon had a beautiful swishing sort of graphic going on there. This guy doesn't anymore. And the last thing this thing needed, going along with this huge price hike, is to be more plain looking, right? It has a different blade profile to it with a little bit less flat, a little bit more belly, which, again, honestly, I feel like none of the fixes here, possibly excepting the clip, which is better, none of the fixes here were really improvements. They were just making it different. And so for me, like I said, I kind of went into it knowing that, God, I kind of wish they just reissued the Zero with some fixes. Or I'm sorry, the Light, that is, with some fixes. But hey, you know, it is what it is. Review where you start. Next thing, one thing that's always bothered me about Shirogorov is this right here. I mean, although this doesn't have any of the creep where if you push the block or you push the lock bar over it, it creeps in further there. What you can see here is that there is a little ridge there, and that means that there's going to be a certain point after which the knife can no longer wear in on the lock bar, on the lock face, that is. Now, that said, the lockup here is very, very light. It's secure. There's no problem with it. It's not a slippy or anything like that. But there's a point where that will wear over time and over a long period of time, although, again, with a steel lock bar insert, shouldn't be a problem. But there is still that physical limit that isn't there, for instance, on a knife where the lock face is going to be able to move, or where the lock bar is going to be able to move across the entire face if it comes up. And so this is more theoretical than anything. Honestly, I've never had, in all of the knives I've had, I've never had a frame lock start to move over that much further over time. I'm probably being overblown here, but I still don't like the fact that you've got that ridge there that will prevent the lock from naturally aging past a certain point. Whatever, that one I can probably admit that's probably just paranoia. And actually, knife makers, feel free to, you know, chime in down in the comments below, but it just feels like a weird thing to me, and I don't quite get it. Next thing, detent on this guy. So I'm a little torn, because if you have no fingers anywhere, the detent on this guy is damn near... Oh, okay. Oh, shoot, I still had a finger over here. Okay, hold on, let me try that again. Fingers are completely off the lock bar. Now... detent is perfect, absolutely stellar. However, if you have your fingers anywhere near the lock bar on this guy, it is very easy to slip off of the flipper tab there. And if you slip off the flipper tab, guess where you end up? We'll get back to that one later on. But the detent to me feels a little bit too hard. I have to grip this in a very weird way, such that all of the pressure is on these back two fingers, and this finger is doing nothing. It's just kind of floating. And I found that probably... I don't know, 1/8 of the time I carried, and I gave this guy more pocket time than usual, just because I was so conflicted throughout this review. About 1/8 of the time that I carried this guy, I probably failed to flip, and that's, by the way, artificial precision. It could have been a 7th. I'm not 100% sure. But anyways, it just, the detent on this guy, with any pressure on the lock bar at all, can be hard enough that you cannot open the knife, and that's really just not great. And so I know that that's a difficulty, and that, you know, if you put your fingers on the lock bar, you got a problem. In some ways, this is a nick problem, not a Shiro problem, but it's not a nick problem that I have with a bunch of other pocket knives who I think have dialed that detent in a little bit differently and maybe a little bit better. So there's that. Next thing, the screws. Screws suck. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. They're fine. You can use, you know, you can use a coin. You can use a conventional flathead driver. You can do a lot of things to get up in there, although coins are harder on the back one because it's recessed. But nobody has yet ever given me a reason why it's better than Torx. Because... Well, it ain't. Of all the stupid proprietary-ish screws, and it's not even cut all the way through, so you're always a little bit off angle here, so it's very easy to slide out of that guy and scratch up your $700 knife as you're doing that. I mean, I know that they want to sell pens, which include pivot tools, but guys, come on. Just go Torx, or just, I don't freaking know. I'm being picky here, but for $715, you could throw the tool in the box. I mean, for $715, you could throw 8 tools in the box. Anyways, I don't care for the screws. And actually, speaking of disassembly, the other thing that bugs me a little bit, well, one of the other things that bugs me is the MRBS system. Now, look, MRBS works fine. It's great. It's fine. But the thing is, I can't say that the action is consistently better or different, frankly, than other knives out there that are using just conventional caged bearings, right? I mean, this is just as drop-shutty on a conventional set of caged bearings as the MRBS is here. I mean, maybe you could make an argument that it's got better lateral support for hard use or something. I don't freaking know. But it honestly feels like a little bit more trouble than it's worth here. We've had so many knife makers who've now gone on to show us that caged bearings can work just as well in terms of drop shuttitude that I just don't understand, continuing to go there. Whatever, not a huge one. Next thing, this one bugged me actually substantially, and damn near every time I use the knife. This knife needs a detent ball ramp. It is so very, very easy, as you've got this guy disengaged, to get stuck right here and to kind of have to power over the detent ball thing, whereas if they just put a little bit of a ramp to get that detent ball up onto the blade, it would just be a nicer experience overall. This is something that usually I would just put in, the early part of the bed, like, oh, you could do that, but for $715, you need to be taking every possible step that you can take with this knife to make it absolutely perfect and ideal, and you know what? That's a good step to take. So a detent ball ramp would absolutely be an improvement, and honestly, at this price point, it feels like a lack. Next thing, I gotta be honest, this is really plain. I mean, it's an attractive knife. It's cool looking, and for some people that subtlety is gonna be nice. But I really like the pattern on the old Neon. I really like some of the stuff they're doing with some of their other versions, but to go completely sterile on this guy, I don't know. For me, and again, all of this is through the filter of $715. Pardon me, at $400, oh yeah, it looks great. But once you start getting up here, I want to see something. I want to see some intricacy in the machining. I want to see patterns. I want to see something going on that just makes me think, oh, wow, that's where my money went. And right now, this really ain't doing that for me. So there's that. Then finally, the clip on this guy is a little bit better than it was on the Neon Light, but it still kind of sucks. You've got a single point of contact, although it is now a longer point of contact than the original Neon. It is still a very, very tight clip, and it doesn't have all that much flex to it, although, again, it's a little bit better. Every time I took this out, and especially if you are pinching to pull the knife out of the pocket, which presses the clip down further, this is just not great. I'd like to see them do that clip a little bit better. There are so many other better clips in the world, and this one just really isn't that great. It's better than the original Neon, that's for damn sure. And that was probably one of my biggest issues with the original Neon, but it just still doesn't work great in terms of actual pocketing. Aesthetically, ergonomically, it's a stellar, but in terms of pocketing, not so damn much. And so, to me at least, all that is the bad, is that the clip is still not great. It is very plain, which again, at this kind of a price point, show a little bit more flair, guys. It has it lacks a detent ball ramp. The MRBS system is fine, but it's a lot of work, and it's not winning you all that much relative to cage systems these days. The screws on them, just kind of, guys, just use real screws. The detent is a little bit too hard, especially if you have any pressure on the lock bar. The lock bar has a wear limit, and I dislike some of the changes they made to make it to 0. On the ugly front, unfortunately, in a $715 knife, we have a fair amount of ugly here. A couple of things. To start with, the blade. The blade is just too close in the back here. I know that for some people, they're going to look at that like, oh, come on, you're safe, clearance is clearance, right? But the problem is, with my fingers, I can absolutely touch this sharpened heel of the blade, and that's not good. And especially for a knife where the detent is so hard that it's easy to come sliding off of here, that's really extra not good. And so I'm really not a fan of that. This is something that they just need to do a little bit better. I know that they're trying to make the guy thin and small, but guys, no, that just doesn't fly. No, I'm sorry. Next thing, this has a toolless free spinning pivot. What I mean by that is that there is it is tooled on this side, but the back side of this guy just spins freely, and there is no way to stop it. As you saw in my disassembly, you can often fix that by applying some downward pressure like this, where I'm trying to kind of torque the knife up off the table, pressing the blades laterally into the table. That can help you to secure it a little bit. But guys, again, $715. This is something you can fix. Every other damn knife company is fixing this issue, whether by fixing the pivot in place on one side, by including some kind of a tool on the other side, even if they just did the same thing on the back side. Pardon me. That would work beautifully. They just have to do something to make that no longer an issue, but it is an issue. And it is a substantial issue, because if the guy who bought it before you puts it back together with red Loctite, guess what? You may have a busted knife, and you're sending it overseas to Russia, and you're needing warranty cards and all kinds of craziness. So no. Just fix that. Again, $715, you're not allowed to make those kinds of mistakes. And that brings us to the final point that I've said probably 80 times right now, which is the price. $715. Now, look, okay, I want to be very clear about something. I don't mind $715 as a knife price, but you have to do something serious to earn that. This knife right here is a really excellent $400 knife. If this were $400, I would be shouting about it from the rooftops, because it is substantially good. There is so much to love about this guy, and I will freely admit that I am probably being excessively harsh about this because of that price point. But when you reach up to that point, you really invite that kind of thing. But at $400, super easy to recommend. At $500, you know what? I could still see sending some people this guy's way. Even the original $650 price, though, because the Neon Light was $650 with the extra milling on the outside there, given that this has more pocketing and whatnot. But still, the original Neon Light was $650, and that was a freaking stretch. That was pretty high. That should have been a little lower. But $715, and then they charged me shipping? Come on, guys. This is nuts. I mean, in fact, the fact that they did any kind of a price increase, that is the very last thing that Shirogorov should be saying for the next 10 years or so. They need to go into price hike timeout with Omega and Rolex, and no, I'm sorry. In fact, they need to be actively researching how to bring their prices down a little bit. Because unfortunately, $715 does not make this knife, it doesn't reflect this knife very well. This is a knife with substantial flaws, with a free spinning pivot, with a blade too close in the back, with a clip that is just not stellar, with no detent ball ramp, with all of these kinds of things. It's got things that feel like flaws, well, that are flaws, and it's got things that feel like cut corners. Even the lack of machining, maybe that's a design choice, maybe that's their new aesthetic, maybe they're going to bring back pretty machining on it and probably charge $900 for it, for all I freaking know. But either way, this is a relatively basic production flipper frame lock. Ask yourselves, if I were to remove the bear and this were made by Rayot, how much would you be paying for this? Yeah, closer to $450, $500, maybe $550, but then I'd be complaining. But no, this bear is not worth $250. I'm sorry. It just ain't. This needs to be so far beyond perfection at this kind of a price for it to be worth considering. They need to earn that price. That is a price that is a perfection price. They need to be taking active steps to search and destroy anything that could even be seen by the pickiest of picky people to be a problem. If they want to earn that, they need to be doing every damn thing they can to make this thing as excellent as they possibly can and demonstrate to the community at that price point just how damn hard they're trying in order to earn it. And I don't get that here. I don't get that at all. And so to me, at least, that's what's ugly here, is that this doesn't feel like a $715 knife, even though it is. It has a free spinning pivot, and the blade is so close in the back that you could very easily cut your finger, especially sliding off this detent here. So to me, that's what's ugly. On the final conclusion front, this is a hard knife to review, and in fact, this was a knife that actually I ended up taking way longer on to review than I thought I would. At some level, it is actually a really amazing knife. There's a lot to love about it. I mean, it has a great action. It has great internal milling. It's got great details. It's a great shape, and the blade on it is just excellent. I freaking love this blade. I wish that I could have this blade on so many knives out there in the world. I wish I had the original Neon blade profile a little bit more, but still, it's an amazing blade with a crazy edge, great steel, etc. There is so much to love about this knife, and in fact, I get it. I totally understand why several of my friends, several people who I respect and consider to be excellent reviewers feel like this knife is really, really excellent, because you know what? It is. There's a great deal of joy here, and this could be an excellent EDC choice. 100%. I can see somebody buying this guy and being very happy about it. But for me, at least, my problem was then the other stuff hits. And given I'm picky, I critique things. That's kind of what I do, right? But there is a bunch of negative stuff here. The fact that they made the knife a little bit less externally interesting with this revision. The detent is so hard as to require careful opening. The screws on it kind of suck. The bearings are a bit of a pain. The detent needs a ramp. The clip is not great. The blade being so close in the back here and a free spinning pivot. That's a long list of negatives, period, for a knife. I feel like a lot of those things can be addressed, and frankly could have been addressed in the jump up to the Zero here. I would be singing such a different tune if they addressed some of those things. If this weren't a free spinning pivot, if they didn't make that mistake, if they just done a little bit, fix any of those things, and this could have been a very, very worthwhile upgrade. But to me, that bothers me at any price point, but then the price hits, and that's the fundamental thing about this knife. This knife is great. Absolutely 100%. This knife is an absolutely wonderful knife, and it probably could be a gem at the right price point. But it has several issues that place it substantially down behind the curve for higher-end pieces. That's fine, but the price needs to reflect it. And like I said, for $400, okay, no problem. You got some fixes for Gen 2, but that's a great option. Everybody go buy one. At $500, it's getting to be a little bit up there. It's high. You've got more competition. And you're getting into knives that are abject perfection from other makers. Like CKF is doing stuff at $500. Like the Sukhoi, the latest Sukhoi, is absolutely amazing. And it feels, frankly, just as nice as this guy in terms of machining, but then it goes way above and beyond. It does a bunch of extra stuff just to show off, and that's still $215 cheaper than this guy. At $600, it's real pricey. It's getting up to be against some of the best of the best, and once you hit $715, you're just not allowed to have these major flaws. Because for $715, not only do you have some of the amazing stuff that's coming out of folks like Wii and Rayot and things like that, CKF, you've got, but you're up against some of the better small batch production companies around the world, right? You are up against things like the Southern Mini Tolk. You're up against the Koenig Arius. You're up against the Holt Spectre. You're up against the Grimsmo. Well, actually, no, they raised their prices even high. Either way, you are up against a whole lot of really amazing pieces from a whole lot of very small companies, right? From people working out of a garage rather than working out of a major production house out of Russia. I mean, seriously, a major production. Maybe they're smaller than I'm giving them credit for. I don't know. But either way, a lot of those knives are damn near perfect, and they've spent a lot of time iterating, making new generations, and fixing those flaws. But here they haven't. Here's Shirogorov selling a knife that feels like it needs to include $250 in the box to compete in the modern market. Maybe I'm off base here. Maybe people are going to go like, oh, Nick, come on. What, realistically, how are they competing? But no, I mean, seriously. In 2016, when I reviewed the Neon Light, in many ways, Shiro was a lot more unique. The actions that they were putting on the knives were a lot more unusual, with those really stiff detents, the really nice blades and whatnot, with the machining that was very, very precisely done, and with really nice designs. They were a lot more unique back then. And relative to the competition, really, there weren't that many people doing these amazing detents. There weren't that many people doing amazing edges. There weren't that many people doing amazing internal milling. They just weren't quite, they were way above the scene. But unfortunately, I feel like this knife in many ways has stood still in a bunch of ways. Sure, they've made a couple of changes to it, but they're not necessarily keeping up. They're not fixing some of the flaws that I think they really do need to, because a lot of the competitors have. They're not bringing down the price to match what their competition is now doing. They're not going above and beyond. By standing still, and I've got a whole video on this, but by standing still, I feel like Shirogorov has started to fall behind here. It remains an amazing knife, but the thing is, the competition has gotten way more amazing at prices that are much, much lower than this. And that feels to me like a little bit of a bad plan. I mean, the name remains prestigious. I still consider myself to be a fan of Shirogorov, even though lately their pricing decisions have left me completely flummoxed. This is a very, very nice knife, and I would love nothing more for them to drop the NeOn Zero 2.0, where they fix the issues and maybe bring the price down, or frankly, where they fix the issues and just go a little bit of an extra mile to earn that price. That would be amazing. I would love that, and I would probably buy it. But the thing is, you're not that special anymore, Shirogorov. I really like your work, and I want to love your work, and I want to recommend it all damn day long, but they're not looking that special anymore. The competition has stepped up the game massively, and I'm not sure they have stepped up to match, but they've stepped their prices way up. They can't continue to skate producing knives with some substantial issues at higher than market prices. And so this review turned out to be super hard for me, because how do you handle this knife, which is really excellent? I mean, seriously, this is an amazing knife. And I kept going back and forth between, do I want to keep this? This is so damn good. But it's truly excellent, but it's also truly overpriced. And it's got a bunch of flaws that maybe they're not deal breakers on their own, although... but they're not there in the competition. And so, for me, even though I loved the Neon originally, I loved the original one here, it was amazing, I'm not going to call this a gem. And in fact, I'm sort of borderline on the fence. Where I eventually ended up landing was just kind of like, no. I guess not, no. I love the original, but that was then. In 2016, the Shirogorov Neon Light was a whole different world. It was out of the ballpark that everybody else was playing in. Well, now guess what? Everyone else has showed up, and there's a problem here. So either my tastes have evolved, I've become even more snobbish somehow, or the market has evolved, or just their prices have been going up. Again, this could be amazing at the right price, but it doesn't do what it used to do for me, and so I got no desire here. There is no part of me that wants to hold on to this knife. Once I finished my review, and that was kind of what signaled me that I was done, is just like, okay, yeah, I'm good now. I had no conflict anymore. It was just like I handled some of the stuff that was in the collection here. You know, I handled the MIDI Tolt, which fixes a couple of those major issues there and frankly shows a little bit more flair. It shows a little bit more technique. You might not love the design, but by God, it's doing a lot of the same damn things. There's the Spectre. This guy is going up for auction for cherry, but it's a good example of it, and I'm getting my own one of these guys here shortly, which has, frankly, more elaborate work and a smoother action. And there is no shortage of other great knives from other makers that I think compete pretty favorably with this guy, especially when you get into that price point. So this guy is going up for sale, and I don't really think I'm going to miss it at all. But the thing is, that said, even with that said, you might buy this knife, and you might love this knife. Heck, it may be a gem for you. There is a lot to love about this, and if all the things I've been bringing up are complete non-issues to you, then you know what? It's going to be fine. Know that you're overpaying, and if you can get a great price on one used, hey, all the better. But, you know, you might absolutely love it. But for me, the way I end up feeling is just like, I hope that Shiro sees the writing on the wall here. Maybe I'm being overdramatic. Maybe I'm being contrarian. I just don't know. But to me, it really feels like Shirogorov is a little bit trapped in the past, and that they haven't yet risen to the challenge of the modern market. They're not responding to the change in their competition, and so they need to either up their game and just fix every damn problem and make everything way better still, or they need to drop their prices to acknowledge that they have moved a little bit more towards the mid-range than maybe they used to be. Because if they keep raising their prices while standing still, or frankly even keep them the same, I'm going to have zero interest in their future products. So there you go. It's an absolutely amazing knife. I like it a lot, but then there were places where it's not, and then, yeah. Anyway, so there you go. That's the review. The trials and tribulations of knife review. Anyways, there you go. I hope this has been interesting, that you were able to bear all of my inner conflictedness as you were dealing with this, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. This might have been a useful review for you for Shiro. No? Okay. I give up. Bye now.